Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story is different from what we usually cover here. It's about a man who came to Vietnam so convinced he'd be scammed that he decided to become the scammer first. About someone so damaged by his past that he turned genuine love into a weapon. This is Marcus's story, and it's a confession that's going to make you question who the real victim is. 34 years old, IT security specialist from Munich, Germany. He thought he was too smart to be played. Thought he could spot every con, every angle, every lie. What he didn't realize was that the biggest con he'd encounter in Vietnam would be the one he was running on himself. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Have you ever been so hurt by someone that you stopped being able to trust anyone? Hit that like button if you've ever let past pain turn you into someone you didn't recognize, and subscribe for more stories about the complicated, messy reality of relationships in Southeast Asia. Alright, here's Marcus's story. In his own words, I landed in Ho Chi Minh City on a Tuesday morning in late February, and the first thing I felt stepping off that plane was anger. Not at Vietnam, not at the heat that hit me like walking into an oven, just anger at everything that had led me here. At Stefani for taking half of everything I'd worked for. At the Munich court system for deciding that 12 years of marriage entitled her to my apartment, my savings, and my dignity. At myself for being stupid enough to trust someone in the first place. The divorce had been finalized 6 weeks earlier. Stephanie got the flat in Schwabing that I'd bought before we even met. Got half my pension. Got the car. Got everything except my job and my resentment. The mediator had smiled sympathetically and explained that German law was very clear about marital assets. I'd sat there in that sterile office listening to my life being divided up like we were splitting a restaurant bill, and something inside me had just gone cold. I didn't contest it, didn't fight. Just signed the papers and started planning my exit from Germany. My company had been pushing remote work options for senior staff, and I was good enough at my job that they agreed to let me work from anywhere with decent internet. I chose Vietnam specifically because it was far away and cheap, and because every expat forum I'd read was full of warnings about scams. Women who'd take your money, sob stories about sick relatives, elaborate cons that could drain you dry if you weren't careful. Perfect, I thought. Let them try. I'd spent weeks before leaving reading those forums, learning the patterns, the common tactics, how they'd target lonely foreign men, how they'd build emotional connection before making financial requests, how they'd disappear once the money stopped flowing. I memorized it all like I was studying for an exam, and somewhere in that research, something dark had crystallized in my mind. A plan. A game. If these women wanted to scam lonely foreigners, I'd become the unscammable. Better yet, I'd flip it. I'd find the scammers and play them back. Make them think they'd found an easy mark, then pull the rug out. Prove to myself that I wasn't the fool Stefani had made me feel like. I know how that sounds. I'm not proud of it. But sitting in my hotel room that first night in District 1, jet-lagged and bitter, scrolling through Vietnamese dating apps with cold calculation, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Agency. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. Ho Chi Minh City was exactly what I expected. Chaotic, loud, humid, overwhelming. Motorbikes flooding every street like a river of metal and exhaust. The constant honking, the smell of street food mixing with garbage and incense. Buildings crammed together, old French colonial architecture next to modern glass towers, next to crumbling apartments with laundry hanging from every balcony. It was alien and aggressive, and I liked it specifically because it demanded nothing from me emotionally. I found an apartment in District 2, the expat area across the river. Modern building, decent security, fast internet, furnished in that generic way that could be anywhere. I didn't care. I wasn't here to nest. I was here to work, to exist, to prove something to myself that I couldn't quite articulate. My routine became mechanical. Wake up at 6 to catch the end of the Munich business day. Work until early afternoon. Then I'd take my laptop to coffee shops and swipe through dating apps while pretending to work. I was hunting, looking for the tells, the two beautiful profile photos, the immediate interest in meeting up, the questions about my job that were really questions about my income. I found them easily, matched with them, messaged them, always with this cold analytical part of my brain making notes. This one mentioned family problems in her third message, red flag. This one asked what I did for work before asking my name. Red flag. This one's photos looked professional, probably stolen from Instagram. Red flag. I'd screenshot everything, organize it in folders on my laptop like I was building legal cases. Evidence of patterns. Proof that I understood the game better than they did. I went on a few dates those first weeks. Coffee meetings, nothing serious. I'd sit across from these women and watch them perform. The practice smiles, the careful questions, the way they'd touch my arm at just the right moment. I could see the mechanics of it, could see them calculating whether I was worth the investment of time. I'd play along for an hour, ask my own careful questions, then make excuses and leave. Never saw any of them twice. What was the point? I already knew how it would end. The expats I met were exactly what I expected too. Middle-aged English teachers drinking too much and complaining about their Thai ex-girlfriends. Young backpackers pretending Saigon was some profound spiritual experience when really they were just high and lost. Bitter divorce guys like me who'd say things like, "Never let them know how much you make, and always keep your bank accounts separate." Like these were profound life lessons instead of just sad paranoia. I fit right in. Became one of them. The cynical German who'd nod knowingly when someone told another scam story. Who'd add my own observations about red flags and warning signs. Who'd buy the round of beers while internally feeling superior because I was aware, conscious, in control. I wasn't going to be one of those pathetic stories, the foreigner who fell for the sob story and lost everything. I'd already lost everything once, never again. 6 weeks into my Vietnam experience, and I'd settled into this cold, bitter routine. Work, coffee shops, dating apps, categorizing women by their scam potential, evening beers with equally damaged men, back to my sterile apartment. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't vulnerable either, and vulnerability felt more dangerous than misery. I met Lynn on a Thursday afternoon in mid-April at a coffee shop near Ben Thanh Market. I'd found this place that wasn't on the tourist maps, mostly locals, good air conditioning, strong Wi-Fi. I'd sit there for hours reading, working, watching Saigon happen outside the windows. That day, I was reading Schopenhauer in German, which probably looked pretentious as hell, but honestly, I just needed something that felt like home. She approached my table and said in English, "Is that Die Welt als Wille und Vorstellung? The world is will and representation?" Her pronunciation was careful but accurate. I looked up, surprised. She was pretty, late 20s, wearing office clothes, a white blouse and black skirt, carrying a leather bag that looked real, not fake. She had this direct way of looking at me, no shy performance, just genuine curiosity. I said yes, asked if she'd read it. She laughed and said no, too dense for her, but she'd studied philosophy at university and recognized the cover. She asked if she could sit down, said she was waiting for a friend and all the other tables were full. I gestured to the empty chair, already running my mental calculations. Pretty girl. Good English. Approaching me first. This was it. This was the setup. But then she sat down and pulled out her own book. Vietnamese text, something about banking regulations. She started reading. Didn't ask me anything. Didn't try to start a conversation. Just sat there sharing the table like this was completely normal. I went back to Schopenhauer, slightly confused. After about 10 minutes, she checked her phone, made a small annoyed sound, and said, "My friend canceled." Typical. Then she looked at me and said, "Do you mind if I ask what brings a German philosopher to Saigon? That's a specific combination." The way she said it was light, genuinely interested, not probing for information about money or status. I gave her my rehearsed answer. IT consultant, working remotely, wanted a change of scenery. She nodded and said she worked at Vietcombank in their commercial lending division. Had lived in Saigon her whole life, except for university in Hanoi. Grew up in District 3, now lived in an apartment in Binh Thanh with a roommate. We talked for maybe 30 minutes. She asked intelligent questions about Germany, about Munich specifically. Said she'd always wanted to visit, but never had the chance. I asked about her work, about Saigon, about what it was like growing up here. The conversation flowed naturally. She was sharp, had opinions, laughed at herself when she messed up an English word. At no point did she ask about my salary, or my apartment, or anything financial. At no point did she mention family problems or needing help with anything. When she left, she said it was nice to meet me, hoped I enjoyed Saigon, then just walked out. Didn't ask for my number, didn't suggest meeting again, just left. I sat there for a while after, slightly thrown off. That didn't match any pattern I'd studied. She'd approached me, yes, but then she'd just been a normal person having a normal conversation. No angle I could see, no setup. I found myself thinking about her that evening, not in an interested way, in an analytical way, trying to figure out what I'd missed, what the play was. Maybe she was running a longer game, building trust first. I'd read about that. The patient scammers who'd spend months establishing legitimacy before making a move. That had to be it. 2 days later, I was back at the same coffee shop, telling myself it was just because the Wi-Fi was good. She walked in around 3 in the afternoon, saw me, smiled with what looked like genuine surprise, and came over to say hello. Asked if this was my regular spot now. I said maybe. She said it was hers too. Had been coming here for years. We ended up talking again, this time for over an hour. She told me about a difficult client at work. I told her about a project that was driving me crazy. Normal work complaints, normal human interaction. When she left that time, I asked if she wanted to get dinner sometime. The words came out before I'd really thought about them. She looked pleased, said she'd like that, and we exchanged numbers. As I watched her walk away, I felt two competing things. First, satisfaction that I'd taken control of the situation, that I was the one making the move. Second, something small and uncomfortable that might have been actual interest. I pushed the second feeling down, focused on the first. We had dinner 3 days later at a Vietnamese restaurant she suggested in District 1. When the bill came, she immediately reached for it, said she'd invited me so she should pay. I insisted on splitting it. She agreed without any performance of protest. We split it exactly down the middle. She pulled out her banking app and showed me the calculation to make sure it was fair. That small gesture, that casual honesty about money, it didn't fit any script I'd prepared for. We saw each other again a few days later. Coffee in the afternoon, her break from work. She asked about my marriage. I'd mentioned being divorced, and she wanted to know about it. I gave her a sanitized version, said it didn't work out, that we'd grown apart. She listened carefully and said, that sounded lonely, being in a relationship where you're growing apart, but still physically together. Said she'd experienced something similar with her ex-boyfriend, a Vietnamese guy who'd wanted her to be more traditional, more submissive, and she'd tried for 2 years before realizing she was erasing herself to make him comfortable. The way she talked about it was raw, honest, not calculated for sympathy. Just sharing because I'd shared. I found myself telling her more about Stefani, about the actual loneliness of those last years, about waking up next to someone and feeling completely alone. She nodded, said she understood exactly that feeling. We sat there in that coffee shop, and I realized I was having the first genuine conversation I'd had in months, maybe longer. That night in my apartment, I pulled up my laptop and looked at the folder where I'd been cataloging potential scammers. I'd been mentally preparing to add Lynn to it, but I couldn't find the angle. She hadn't asked for money, hadn't mentioned family problems, paid her own way, had a legitimate job I'd verified by looking up the bank's staff directory online, lived where she said she lived. Everything checked out. Maybe she was just what she appeared to be. A normal woman with a normal job who'd met a foreigner in a coffee shop and was genuinely interested in getting to know him. The thought was almost more disturbing than if she'd been a scammer. Because if she was genuine, that meant I might actually have to be genuine back. And I didn't know if I could do that anymore. Didn't know if I had anything real left to offer after Stefani had taken everything that mattered and left me with just this cold, calculating shell. I saw Lynn twice more that week. Once for lunch near her office, once for a walk around Tao Dan Park in the evening. Each time I waited for the mask to slip, for the ask to come, for the proof that this was all set up. Each time she was just herself. Funny, thoughtful, asking real questions and giving real answers. She told me about her family, her father who died when she was 19, heart attack, sudden and devastating. Her mother who'd raised her and her younger brother alone, working as a teacher. Her brother who was studying engineering in Hanoi, wanted to work in renewable energy. All of it delivered naturally, not as sob stories but as just her life. By the end of that second week, I'd stopped waiting for the scam and started just existing in her presence. She made me laugh. Made me think, made me feel like maybe I wasn't completely dead inside. And that terrified me more than any scam could have. Because caring about someone meant being vulnerable, meant risk, meant the possibility of being hurt again. And I'd come to Vietnam specifically to avoid all of that. But sitting across from her at a street food place in District 5, watching her laugh at my terrible attempt to use chopsticks properly, I felt something crack in my chest, something warm trying to push through all that cold calculation. And I realized I was facing a choice. I could keep treating this like a game, keep waiting for proof of betrayal, keep protecting myself, Or I could take a risk. Could let myself feel something real for the first time since Stephanie had destroyed me. The smart thing would have been to walk away. To recognize that I wasn't ready, that I was too damaged, that I'd just hurt us both. But I didn't do the smart thing. I leaned into it, told myself I could control this, could manage the risk, could let myself care just enough without becoming vulnerable. I kissed her that night, standing on the street outside her apartment building, and she kissed me back like she'd been waiting for it, like she wanted it as much as I did. And in that moment, with the Saigon heat pressing down and the motorbikes rushing past and her hand on my chest, I made a decision without fully realizing it. I decided I could have this, could have her, could let myself feel something while still maintaining control, could protect myself while still taking what I wanted. I didn't see the contradiction, didn't see how impossible that balance was, didn't see that I was setting up something that would eventually destroy us both. I just felt her lips on mine and thought, finally, something good. Finally, something that wasn't about loss and bitterness and cold calculation. Finally, someone who saw me and wanted me anyway. I should have been more careful what I wished for. Should have understood that getting what you want is sometimes worse than not getting it at all. Should have walked away right then before anyone got hurt. But I didn't. I pulled her closer and let myself believe this could work. Let myself believe I could have genuine connection without genuine vulnerability. Let myself believe the lie that would eventually unravel both of us. 2 months in, and I'd stopped pretending this was casual. Lynn had become part of my daily routine in a way that should have scared me, but mostly just felt right. We'd see each other 4 or 5 times a week. She'd come to my apartment after work, we'd cook dinner together, or order in, watch Vietnamese movies she'd translate for me. She'd stay over sometimes, wake up early to get ready for work, while I'd make coffee and watch her move through my space like she belonged there. On weekends, we'd explore the city, ride her motorbike out to Cu Chi tunnels, or down to the Mekong Delta. These day trips where we'd just talk for hours about everything and nothing. I'd opened up to her in ways I hadn't planned to, told her about Stephanie, about the real damage of that divorce. Not just the financial hit, but the psychological erosion of spending years with someone who'd slowly stop seeing you as human, who'd look at you across the dinner table with this expression of mild disappointment, like you were a purchase she regretted but was stuck with. Lynn listened without judgment, asked careful questions, said she understood that kind of slow death. Said her ex had done something similar, made her feel like she was never quite enough, never quite what he wanted. We bonded over our shared damage, both of us carrying wounds from people who'd made us feel inadequate, both of us trying to figure out if we could trust again. It felt profound at the time, that mutual understanding. Looking back, I can see how dangerous it was. 2 broken people trying to fix each other without having fixed themselves first. She met my expat friends, the guys I'd drink with at the bars in District 2. They liked her. Said she seemed genuine, not like the usual girls. Lars, the cynical Swede who'd been in Vietnam for years, pulled me aside one night and said, "She's good for you, man. You seem less angry." I took it as validation. Proof that I'd been right to take the risk, right to let myself care. I didn't tell him about the cold calculation that still lived in the back of my mind. The part of me that was still watching, still waiting, still cataloging everything just in case. Because I was still doing that. Still keeping mental notes. Still observing patterns. Not consciously, not as deliberately as before, but the habit was there. When she mentioned family things, I'd note them. When she talked about money, I'd pay attention. I told myself it was just prudence, just awareness, just making sure I wasn't being naive. But really, it was insurance. A way to maintain control, even while pretending to be vulnerable. Then in early June, about 10 weeks into us being together, something shifted. We were having dinner at my apartment, this pasta dish she'd taught me to make properly, and her phone rang. She checked it, her face changed, and she excused herself to the balcony to take the call. I could hear her speaking Vietnamese, the tone worried, stressed. When she came back inside, she looked shaken. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, like she didn't want to burden me. Then she sat down and said her mother had fallen, broken her hip badly. She was in the hospital in District 8. They'd done x-rays and the doctor said she needed surgery, hip replacement, fairly urgent. The public hospital could do it, but the wait was months and her mother was in pain. The private hospital could do it next week, but it was expensive. 15 million dong. She said the number quietly, almost apologetically. Then she converted it for me. About $600. Her brother was in Hanoi, couldn't get the money together quickly. She had some savings, but not enough. Was trying to figure out if she could get a loan from the bank where she worked. She wasn't asking me for anything, just explaining her stress, her worry. But I could see the calculation happening in her eyes. The question of whether she could ask me, whether she should, whether it would change things between us. And I felt it. That cold recognition, here it was, the ask. The moment I'd been waiting for, preparing for, almost hoping for, since I'd met her. Proof that this was what I'd suspected all along. That eventually everyone wants something. That genuine connection was just the setup for the real play. I felt vindicated and disappointed and strangely calm all at once. But then something else happened, something I hadn't planned for. I looked at her sitting there, actually distressed, actually worried about her mother, and I realized I had a choice. I could see this as confirmation of my cynicism, or I could see it as what it probably was, a real person dealing with a real problem. And more than that, I realized I had power here. The power to help or not help, the power to be generous or withholding, the power to shape what happened next. An idea crystallized, dark, calculated, but perfectly formed. If she was scamming me, if this was the long game I'd been watching for, I could flip it. I could give her the money, give her everything she asked for, make her think she'd won. And then, once I had proof, once I'd documented everything, I could destroy her. Not financially, I didn't care about the money, but emotionally. I could make her fall in love with me completely, make her vulnerable and invested, and then reveal that I'd known all along, that I'd been playing her the entire time, that she'd been the mark, not me. And if she wasn't scamming me, if this was genuine, then I'd just be a good boyfriend helping his girlfriend's family in a crisis. Win-win. I'd either catch a scammer or be a hero. Either way, I maintained control. I heard myself say, "I'll give you the money." She looked up, surprised. Started to protest, said she couldn't accept that. It was too much. I cut her off. Said we were together, that her problems were my problems, that this was what people did for each other. Said I had savings, that $600 wasn't going to hurt me, that her mother's health was more important than money. She started crying. Actually crying, tears running down her face, saying I was too good to her, that she didn't deserve someone so kind. She hugged me tight, and I held her and felt two things simultaneously. One, genuine warmth at being able to help, at being needed in this way. Two, cold satisfaction that the game had begun, and I was already 3 moves ahead. I transferred the money the next day. She showed me updates from the hospital, photos of her mother post-surgery, thanked me a dozen times. Her gratitude felt real, her relief felt real, and I couldn't tell anymore if I was being genuinely kind or manipulatively generous. The line had blurred. Maybe that was the point. 3 weeks later, she mentioned her brother. He'd found an opportunity to intern at a renewable energy company in Hanoi, his dream field. But it was unpaid for the first 3 months, and he couldn't afford rent and food without income. Her mother was still recovering, couldn't help financially. Lynn was stressed, feeling guilty that she couldn't support him when he'd worked so hard to get this opportunity. Again, she wasn't directly asking, just sharing her stress. But I offered immediately. Said I'd cover his expenses for 3 months. What would that be? Maybe $500 total. She protested harder this time, said it was too much, that I'd already done so much for her family. I insisted. Said I believed in supporting education, in helping young people chase their dreams. Said her brother sounded like a good kid, and I wanted to help. She cried again. Called me her generous boyfriend, her kind German. Said she'd never met anyone like me, and I held her and felt that same split sensation. Part of me genuinely wanting to help, genuinely moved by her gratitude. Part of me cataloging this as evidence item 2, documentation for whatever was coming. I started keeping more detailed notes, not in an obvious folder on my laptop anymore, but in an encrypted file. Dates, amounts, her exact words when asking or not asking. Screenshots of bank transfers. I told myself it was just prudence, just keeping records. But really, I was building a case. Either proof of her con or insurance against my own doubt. The pattern continued through June and July. Her cousin needed help with business inventory costs. Her childhood friend's daughter's school fees. Credit card debt from a failed business venture she'd tried 2 years ago. The interest was killing her. Could I help her pay it down? Each request came with obvious genuine stress. Each request was for amounts that were significant, but not devastating. 300 here, 400 there. Nothing that made me hesitate much. Nothing that seriously impacted my savings, though collectively they were adding up. And with each request, each transfer, Lynn seemed to fall deeper. She'd tell me I was different from Vietnamese men who were stingy with money, different from other foreign men who were generous but cold. She'd say I understood what it meant to care for family, to support the people you loved. She'd be more affectionate, more vulnerable, share deeper things about her fears and hopes. I watched her falling for me and felt something complicated. Pride that my plan was working. Guilt that I might be manipulating genuine emotion. Confusion about whether I was falling too, because I was, in some way. Her laugh still made my chest feel light. Her opinions still interested me. Waking up next to her still felt better than waking up alone. But underneath all of that was this cold observer, this part of me taking notes, staying detached, maintaining control. My expat friends started making comments. Lars asked me how much I'd given her total. I downplayed it, said it wasn't that much, maybe 1,500 over a few months. He looked skeptical but didn't push. Another guy, an Australian teacher named Dave, said, "Just be careful, mate. Family emergencies are the classic play here." I got defensive, said Lynn wasn't like that her family problems were real and verified, which they were. I'd seen the hospital records, met her brother on video calls, seen the receipts, everything checked out, but that was almost more confusing. If everything was legitimate, then what was I doing? Was I helping my girlfriend through genuine difficulties? Or was I running some sick psychological experiment on an innocent person? The question kept me up some nights. I'd lie in bed with Lynn sleeping beside me and feel this growing dread that maybe I was the villain in this story. That maybe I'd come to Vietnam so convinced I'd be scammed that I'd created a scam of my own. In late July, she introduced me to her mother. We went to her family's small apartment in District 8. This modest place with old furniture and family photos covering the walls. Her mother was recovering from the surgery, walking with a cane, and she greeted me with such warmth it physically hurt. She kept thanking me in Vietnamese, Lynn translating, saying I'd saved her from months of pain. She'd made Vietnamese food, this huge spread, and we sat on the floor eating, and she told stories about Lynn as a child. It felt real. All of it felt desperately, uncomfortably real. Her mother's gratitude, her brother joining us on video call to thank me for supporting his internship, the family dynamic that matched exactly what Lynn had described. I couldn't find the con, couldn't see the angle, and without the angle, what was I doing? Who was I? I excused myself to use the bathroom and stood there in that small, modest bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror and feeling something crack. I'd come to Vietnam to avoid being the victim, to prove I was smarter, more aware, more in control than the men who got played. But looking at my reflection, I saw something worse than a victim. I saw a manipulator. Someone who'd taken genuine vulnerability and treated it like a tactical game. Someone who'd weaponized generosity to maintain psychological control. I went back out and finished dinner and was charming and kind and everything Lynn's mother thought I was. But inside, I felt hollow, because I'd realized something I didn't want to face. Lynn wasn't scamming me. She never had been. She was just a person with real problems who'd found someone capable of helping and had cautiously, carefully, accepted that help while falling genuinely in love. And I was the one running the con. I was the one keeping score, maintaining emotional distance, planning some abstract moment of revelation and revenge that made less sense with each passing day. I'd been so damaged by Stephanie, so convinced that everyone was playing an angle, that I'd become the thing I feared. Not a scammer for money, but something worse. A scammer of hearts. Someone who'd take genuine emotion and treat it like a commodity to be controlled and manipulated. The truth was crushing. I'd given Lynn maybe $3,000 over 3 months. I had plenty more where that came from. The money didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd given it while holding back my actual heart, while maintaining this cold observer, while keeping one foot out the door ready to pull away and declare victory in a game only I was playing. That night in my apartment, after we'd left her mother's place, Lynn was quieter than usual. We were lying in bed and she turned to me and said, "Can I ask you something?" Her voice was serious, vulnerable, in a way that made my stomach tighten. I said yes. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you love me? Really love me?" "Because I love you, Marcus. I'm in love with you. And sometimes I worry that you're waiting for me to do something wrong. Like you're watching for proof that I'm like the girls you read about on those expat forums. Like you don't fully trust that this is real." The accuracy of her observation hit me like cold water. She'd seen it, seen through me. seen the part of me that was still holding back, still calculating, still running a game I couldn't fully admit to myself. I should have told her the truth right then. Should have confessed everything, laid bare the psychological manipulation I'd been running. Should have given her the chance to decide if she wanted to stay with someone so fundamentally damaged. Instead, I lied. Pulled her close and said of course I loved her, that she was reading too much into my natural caution, that I trusted her completely. Said I was just German, or not as emotionally expressive as other people, but that didn't mean I didn't feel things deeply. She relaxed against me, said she understood, said she was probably just being insecure, and I held her and felt like the worst kind of coward. Because she'd given me an opening to be honest, and I'd chosen comfort over truth. Chosen to maintain the con over risking real vulnerability. And in that moment, lying in the dark with this woman who genuinely loved me, I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I wasn't running a clever game anymore. I was just hurting someone who didn't deserve it, and I didn't know how to stop. August in Saigon was brutal. The heat was oppressive. The humidity made everything sticky, and the afternoon rains came like clockwork, flooding the streets for an hour before the sun returned and turned everything into a sauna. I'd stopped noticing the weather months ago, but now every physical discomfort felt like a metaphor for what was happening inside me. This pressure building, this sense of something about to break. Lynn and I were living in this strange limbo. She'd basically moved into my apartment. Most of her clothes were in my closet, her toiletries in my bathroom, her books on my shelves. We'd talk about maybe getting a bigger place together, somewhere in District 7, maybe near the new developments. She'd scroll through rental listings on her phone and show me options, and I'd nod and say they looked nice while feeling this growing dread. Because I was in too deep and I knew it. I'd given her close to $4,000 over 4 months. Not because I couldn't afford it. I could. My IT security consulting paid well, and living in Vietnam was cheap. The money wasn't the problem. The problem was, I couldn't figure out the truth anymore. Couldn't separate what was real from what I'd convinced myself was manipulation. Couldn't tell if she was the world's most patient scammer, or if I was the world's most paranoid boyfriend. I started doing things I'm not proud of, following her sometimes when she said she was meeting friends. Just to verify. Just to see. Every time her story checked out, she'd be exactly where she said she'd be, with exactly who she said she'd be with. I'd feel relief and shame in equal measure. Relief that she wasn't lying, shame that I was acting like a stalker. I checked her phone once when she was in the shower. Went through her messages, her banking app, her social media. Looking for what? Evidence of other men, secret accounts, proof of the con. I'd convinced myself existed. I found nothing. Just normal conversations with friends and family. Just her actual life, exactly as she'd described it. Just me being the kind of person I'd always hated. The kind who violated trust while claiming to protect themselves. The worst part was the money didn't even matter to me. I could have given her $10,000 and not really felt it. My salary was good, my expenses were low, I had solid savings even after the divorce settlement. What was eating me alive wasn't the financial cost. It was not knowing. Not knowing if her love was real. Not knowing if I was the victim or the villain. Not knowing if I was helping someone genuine or being played by someone patient. My obsession grew darker. I started researching her family more deeply. Found her mother's social media. Used translation apps to read her posts. They matched everything Lynn had told me. Her father really had died of a heart attack 19 years ago. Her brother really was studying engineering. Her cousin really had a daughter in school. Every detail checked out. Every story was verifiable. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Lynn was exactly who she said she was. And that realization was destroying me. Because if she was genuine, then I was the monster. I was the one who'd taken her honest vulnerability and treated it like a chess game. I was the one who'd kept emotional score while pretending to be generous. I was the one running a psychological con on someone who'd done nothing wrong except have family problems and accept help from someone who'd offered it. I'd lie awake at night with her sleeping beside me and replay every interaction. Every time she'd mentioned needing money, had she asked directly or had I offered? Honestly, I'd offered almost every time. She'd share her stress, and I'd immediately jump in with a solution before she could even formulate a request. Was that her being manipulative or me being controlling? Was she pulling strings, or was I orchestrating a scenario that would let me play both hero and victim? The question was making me crazy. I'd sit in coffee shops supposedly working and instead just spiral into these thought loops. Maybe she'd seen through me from the beginning. Maybe she'd recognized a damaged, cynical man and knew exactly how to play him by not playing him at all, by being genuine and letting my own paranoia do the work. Or maybe, and this felt worse, she'd just met a foreign guy in a coffee shop, genuinely liked him, and accepted his help when her family needed it because that's what people do in relationships. I started pulling away without meaning to, being less affectionate, more distracted. When she'd try to talk about the future, I'd change the subject. When she'd reach for me, I'd be responsive but distant. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She'd ask if something was wrong, and I'd say work was stressful, I was tired, it was nothing. She'd look at me with this expression of hurt confusion, and I'd feel guilt stabbed through me. In early September, she asked me directly. We were having dinner at my apartment, this Thai food we'd ordered in because neither of us felt like cooking. And she just put down her chopsticks and said, "You're different lately. Since meeting my mother. Since giving money for my brother. You've been distant. Do you regret helping us? Do you think I'm using you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. I started to give my usual reassurances, but she cut me off. Said, "No, Marcus, really tell me, because I can feel you watching me, analyzing me, like you're waiting for me to reveal myself as some kind of villain. And I don't know what to do with that. I love you. I'm in love with you. But I can't be in a relationship where someone is constantly suspicious of me, where every time my family needs something, you're calculating whether it proves I'm a scam." She was right. Completely, devastatingly right. And I should have come clean then. Should have told her everything. About the forums I'd read before coming to Vietnam. About my plan to flip scams back on scammers. About the notes I'd kept, the observations I'd cataloged. About how I'd approached our entire relationship as a game I was trying to win. Should have given her the truth and let her decide what to do with it. Instead, I got defensive. Told her she was being paranoid, that I was just stressed with work, that she was reading things into normal fluctuations in mood. Gaslit her, essentially. Made her doubt her own accurate perception of what was happening. She backed down, apologized for overreacting, said she was probably just insecure from her past relationship. And I let her apologize. Let her take responsibility for my manipulation. Let her comfort me when I should have been the one begging for forgiveness. That night, after she fell asleep, I went out to the balcony and smoked a cigarette, even though I'd quit years ago. Stood there looking at the Saigon skyline and hated myself more completely than I'd hated Stephanie, more completely than I'd hated anyone. Because Stefani had just stopped loving me, had just fallen out of whatever we'd had and taken what German law said she was entitled to. She'd been cold, but she'd been honest. She'd never pretended, never manipulated, never taken genuine emotion and weaponized it. She'd just been done. But me? I'd taken someone who'd approached me with genuine interest and turned it into a sick experiment. Had taken her vulnerability and her trust and her love and treated it like evidence in a case only I knew existed. Had given her money, not out of generosity, but out of some twisted need to maintain control, to prove I couldn't be scammed, to have leverage for some abstract future confrontation. The next few weeks were torture. I kept pulling away and she kept trying harder. She'd make my favorite foods, plan special dates, be extra affectionate, trying to close the distance I was creating. Every effort she made just made me feel worse, because I could see how genuine it was. How she was actually trying to save something she thought was worth saving. How she loved me despite me giving her less and less reason to. I started researching how to end it. Googling things like, how to break up with someone when you're the problem. And ending a relationship without explanation. Reading forums where people discussed clean breaks versus gradual distance. I was planning my exit strategy while she was planning our future. Then in late September, everything came to a head. She showed me an apartment listing in District 7, 2 bedrooms, nice building, reasonable rent. Said we should look at it together, maybe sign a lease for next month. Her eyes were bright with hope, with excitement about this next step. And something in me just broke. All the guilt, all the self-hatred, all the accumulated weight of knowing I was wrong came crashing down. I told her we needed to talk. She knew immediately from my tone that it was bad. Her face changed, closed off, and she sat down on my couch and said, "Just tell me." I told her everything. The whole thing. How I'd come to Vietnam angry and bitter after my divorce. How I'd read all the expat forums about scams and decided I'd be too smart to fall for any of them. How I'd planned to flip the script, to find scammers and play them back. How when I met her, I'd been suspicious from the beginning, looking for the angle. How I'd kept notes, documented everything. waited for proof that she was conning me. I told her how I'd offered money, not out of pure generosity, but as a test, a way to see if she'd take it, if she'd ask for more. How I'd been running a psychological game on her the entire time. How I'd been waiting to pull the rug out, to reveal that I'd known all along she was scamming me, to win some sick victory that would prove I wasn't the fool Stefani had made me feel like. And I told her the worst part, that she 500 never been scamming me, that everything had been genuine, that her family problems were real, her feelings were real, her love was real. That I'd taken all of that reality and treated it like a con because I was so damaged I couldn't recognize genuine connection anymore. That I'd become the thing I was trying to protect myself from. That I was the scammer, not her. She sat there through my whole confession, her face getting paler, her expression moving from confusion to hurt to something like horror. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, very softly, "So every time I shared something difficult with you, you were taking notes? Every time I accepted your help, you were cataloging it as evidence. Every time I told you I loved you, you were analyzing whether I meant it." I nodded, couldn't speak. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. She said, "I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me, who understood me, who wanted to be with me for me. But you never saw me at all, did you? You just saw a category, a type, a potential scam. You never saw Lynn. You just saw a Vietnamese girl with foreign boyfriend, and you assumed you knew what that meant." She was crying now, these quiet tears running down her face. She said, "I loved you, Marcus. I actually loved you. I told you things I've never told anyone. I let you meet my mother, my family. I imagined a future with you. And the whole time, you were running some sick experiment, testing me, waiting for me to fail some test I didn't know I was taking." I tried to apologize, tried to explain about Stefani, about the damage from my marriage, about being so afraid of being hurt again. She cut me off, said, "I don't care about your ex-wife. I'm not her. I never was her. But you treated me like I was guilty of her crimes. You punished me for what she did to you, and you call that love?" She stood up, started gathering her things. I asked her to stay, to let me make it right somehow. She turned and looked at me with such contempt it physically hurt. She said, "Make it right. You can't make this right. You took something genuine and you poisoned it. You took my vulnerability and you weaponized it. You made me doubt myself, made me apologize for your suspicion, made me try harder to earn a love you were never actually offering." She paused at the door, looked back at me one more time, said, "You know what the saddest part is? If you'd just been honest from the beginning, if you just said you had trust issues and needed time, I would have understood. I would have worked with you. But instead you lied. You performed generosity while withholding your actual heart. You gave me money, but you never gave me you." Then she said something that still haunts me. "You came to Vietnam so convinced you'd be scammed that you became the scammer. And you did it so thoroughly you scammed yourself too. Because we could have been real, Marcus. We could have had something beautiful. But you were so busy protecting yourself from something that wasn't happening that you destroyed the one real thing you'd found." She left. Just walked out of my apartment and out of my life. I tried calling her the next day, but she'd blocked my number. Tried messaging on social media, but she'd blocked me everywhere. I even went to her bank, but the security wouldn't let me up. She was gone. Completely, finally gone. I'm still in Saigon, still in the same apartment, still working the same remote job. But everything feels different now. I see couples everywhere. Vietnamese women with foreign men, and I wonder how many of them are real and how many are transactional. But mostly, I wonder how many of those foreign men are making the same mistake I did. Seeing scams where there's just normal human complexity. Protecting themselves so aggressively they become the thing they fear. I gave Lynn $4,000 over 4 months, and I'd give $40,000 to undo what I did. But the money was never the real cost. The real cost was taking someone's genuine love and treating it like a commodity to be controlled. The real cost was being so afraid of being the victim that I became the perpetrator. Stephanie didn't just take my apartment and my savings in that divorce. She took my ability to trust, to be vulnerable, to accept that sometimes people just love you without angles or games. And I let that poison spread so far inside me that I infected someone innocent. Someone who'd done nothing wrong except fall in love with a man too damaged to recognize it. The real scam wasn't her taking my money. The real scam was me taking her heart and treating it like evidence in a case that never existed. I came to Vietnam to prove I was too smart to be played. Instead, I proved something much worse. That you can be so afraid of being hurt that you become the one who hurts. That you can be so convinced everyone is running a con that you miss the people who aren't. That you can protect yourself so completely you destroy the very thing you're trying to protect. I hear Vietnamese everywhere now, and sometimes I catch myself listening for her voice in crowds. Sometimes I think I see her on a motorbike in traffic, and my heart jumps before I realize it's someone else. Sometimes I sit in that same coffee shop where we met and hope she'll walk in, knowing she never will. She called me a scammer, and she was right. Not because I took her money, because I took something more valuable. I took her trust, her vulnerability, her genuine emotion, and I treated it like a weapon in a war only I was fighting. I took her love and I ran a con on it, testing it, doubting it, holding it at arm's length while pretending to embrace it. And the cruelest irony is that she was the real thing. The genuine connection I'd been running from in my marriage, that I'd come to Vietnam to avoid, that I'd convinced myself didn't exist. She was everything I'd been looking for, and I destroyed it because I was too broken to recognize it when it was right in front of me. That's the lesson I learned too late. Sometimes the biggest scam is the one you run on yourself. The lie you tell so completely you forget it's a lie. I told myself I was being careful, being smart, protecting myself. Really, I was just being cruel. Cruel to her, cruel to myself, cruel to any possibility of genuine connection. She deserved better. Deserved someone who could receive her love without turning it into a test. Someone who could be vulnerable without keeping score. Someone who wasn't so poisoned by their past. They couldn't recognize a gift when it was offered freely. I wasn't that someone. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was already gone. Just like everything else I've ever let myself care about. The difference is, this time I only have myself to blame.